Hi, everyone. I'm Shaheen from The Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with Graham Forsyth, Marketing Director for EMEA and ANZ at Khoros, a leader in customer engagement software. Thanks so much for joining us, Graham.
Thanks for having me.
So just to start off, can you tell us a bit about yourself in your own words?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I'm currently the Marketing Director for EMEA and Australia and New Zealand at Khoros. So Khoros is a global leader in the digital consumer experience space. And we have software and services which cover digital care, messaging, chat, social marketing, online communities. So it's a really exciting, vibrant space to be in. The brand actually came out of the merger of two other companies, so Spreadfast, who were a social marketing platform where I worked previously, and Lithium, who are a leader in the social care space. So I've actually been with the business now for over 5 years. And prior to that, I was at SAP and leading their UK marketing for their HR solutions. I also ran global campaigns for their learning platform. And then prior to that, I worked for telecommunication companies, CRM solutions. So a lot of marketing experience in the technology space.
So, and where are you joining us from today? And where's the company based?
The company's headquartered out of Austin in Texas. We've got offices in San Francisco and New York and Portland. I'm based in London, and we've got offices in Paris and Hamburg, Bangalore, and Sydney as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And so you've been at the company the company and its predecessor, Spreadfast, for over 5 years now, and it sounds like a lot of things have changed over that time. So what's it been like, adapting in terms of marketing with changes at the company?
It's been, I think year on year, the industry's moved so fast that obviously the business has moved with it. Obviously, we've gone through a merger, which was a really exciting time. But I think just the industry, whether you look at it from a social marketing perspective and how that industry has grown and scaled, and the technology has advanced so quickly. If we think about it from a digital care perspective and the sort of emergence of kind of messaging and chat and all of the kind of the digital touch points for consumers, they've all grown so fast, they've all moved so quickly that as a business we've had to just move at that speed as well. So regardless of sort of the company changes, the sort of industry has dictated how the speed of our sort of transition as well. So it's been really exciting. No 2 years have definitely been the same. There's been a lot of changes, but we've seen a lot of success, and it's been a really exciting time. And I think, this year has been probably the strangest one of all. I think we've all experienced that, but it's been we're still seeing a lot of success and a lot of development within the business as well. So it's a good time to be there.
Mm-hmm. And do you mean there's been a lot of change in terms of adapting the product itself or your marketing strategies, or both?
I think both. I think the marketing strategies have definitely changed a lot over the years. How we, our customers have become more sophisticated in their use of this kind of technology. Our technology has obviously transitioned and grown. We've brought platforms together. We've integrated those platforms and really developed the offering. So I think everything has really been moving at a rapid pace, and that's very much dictated by what the customer needs as well.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a bit more about your responsibilities and what's a typical day at work like for you?
Yeah, obviously it varies. I think the one constant in my day is that each morning I will definitely look at our Domo dashboard. So there are our dashboards that give us the insight into how we as a business are performing, and certainly from a marketing point of view. So I start off every morning looking at those dashboards to see, how are we doing that week? How are we trending for the month or the quarter? And, we really use that insight on a daily basis to look back at our programs and campaigns and say, are we on track? Are there things we want to change or adapt? Are there things that we want to accelerate because they're working really well? And then, the rest of the day is really working with my teams, whether that's based in Europe or whether that's with the Australia and New Zealand teams to, make sure that they're comfortable in the programs that they're running. Do they need my support? Where can we scale these programs? How can we do them better? And really kickstart the other projects as well. So a lot of it's dependent on where we are that quarter and what our priorities and what the demands are from the business at that time. But obviously working with the teams across the business as well. So it varies a lot.
And could you tell us a bit more about how you got into marketing in the first place and what attracted you to the profession?
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit by luck, to be honest. I actually came out of university and got a job as a website designer, and with literally no experience. So I learned coding from scratch, and I spent a couple of years doing that. And by working within that website team, I actually then started to sort of slowly transition across into the marketing organization. So I was doing a lot of design work for them, designing kind of online brochures and working on the website as well. And eventually they offered me the role as the marketing manager there. So to be honest, I kind of fell into it. I think my background is quite creative. I probably learned to be more analytic as I've got older. But my background's definitely creative, and that's the bit I love, and now I think my passion's really around the sort of strategy and building out the plans for marketing. So I sort of fell into it slightly by luck, actually.
So you've moved into management over time, but would you say there's still room for creativity in what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's vital. I think that's the one sort of advantage I think we have in marketing, in that, I think marketing has a lot more impact on businesses, and especially when you think about B2B than perhaps it did when I first started in my roles. I think marketing was perhaps a little bit of a luxury in some respects at the time. I think now it's a vital component of all organizations, and the transparency around what marketing can deliver and what marketing can do from a business perspective is a lot clearer. But I don't think that takes away from the creativity. I'm actually someone who's, I'm not actually keen on kind of the B2B and B2C labels. I think that those kind of lines have blurred. I think, in my world, which is inherently kind of B2B, I think we can be more creative. We can have a lot more fun in terms of how we position ourselves in the market, how our brand sort of portrays themselves, the sort of tone of voice and language that we use. So I think, there's still a lot of creativity there, but I think we have to be mindful of what the data is telling us and use that insight, because there is so much valuable insight now to make really informed decisions.
And you were, before you joined Spreadfast, you were at SAP, which is a really huge corporation, as most people know. And I guess when you joined Spreadfast, it was more at a startup stage. So what made you decide to go to a startup at that point of your career?
Just for the change. I was the first hire for Spreadfast in Europe, so they had a really strong team from a marketing and creative and brand point of view, based out of Austin in Texas. But there was no one in Europe, so the European team was pretty new. They were super scrappy, really passionate, and that came across when I first spoke to them. So I was excited to just build something from scratch. SAP was a really wonderful experience. As you said, they're an enormous organization, and there's some super talented people in there. But you are inherently kind of a cog in a big machine. Whereas with Spreadfast, I could really dive in and kind of own the plan from day one, build that out from scratch, and start a kind of new marketing organization, which obviously we built up over the years now. So it was a really fresh and new challenge. And also the social marketing space was really interesting to me. I think it was really getting to the point in Europe where it was beginning to tip over into being really fundamental to a lot of businesses. They really needed to invest in some really robust software. So I felt like it was a good time to be part of that journey.
So who's Khoros' target audience? And what are your most important channels for reaching that audience?
Yeah, so we're very much an enterprise level software. It's interesting because digital customer engagement, really should be owned across the organization now. So our audience can sit anywhere from within the marketing team, so the digital and social media teams, across to customer care or the more traditional call centers or contact centers. There's a lot more newer sort of holistic customer experience roles now, which we're seeing, which are obviously a huge target for us. The people within the business who are really responsible for what's that experience that the customer should expect, along with kind of the IT buyers and the C-suite. So there's a huge number of people and players within organizations now who we can talk to and who we can try and engage with. And, because of that, we're really seeing that we have to be across many channels, and we have to make sure that those are performing really well. And, working specifically within Europe, we do see kind of cultural nuances and geographic nuances. our paid performance from a paid media and a paid social point of view has been really strong, but it's been very different in Germany compared to France, compared to the UK. We've always seen email as actually a really strong channel, and it still continues to perform as a really strong channel. Events have been fantastic for us in the past, and we've had to obviously adapt those this year, but they're still really important because we've got rich content that we want to obviously get across to our audiences. So there is a real mix to how we engage with your audiences, and as I said, it's quite a broad spectrum of people that we can talk to within these enterprise businesses as well.
So what kind of content, do you think works best for your audience? And do you have an example of a campaign or a piece of content that worked really well for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think they've worked well for different reasons. The ones that kind of spring to mind are in the past few years, we've run what we call the Smart Social Report, which is we have a analytics component to our platform, which takes a lot of social platform data and can kind of analyze the trends and insights and consumer behavior. And these reports we typically produce them on a quarterly basis, and we look at kind of industry trends or certain themes and topics that are coming out at that time, or new technology. And you always know with these kind of reports and this kind of insight that the audience kind of loves this kind of stuff because it's sort of rich and it's new and it's stuff that they can really apply to their strategies. But actually, for me, what's really great about these kind of reports is the fact that you can really slice and dice these, and you can get so much mileage out of this kind of content. So we would produce short blog posts based around certain trends or themes. We would definitely take that content and run them as webinar sessions or as roundtables or as part of our conference plans. There's always great sound bites in there that can be used for like our sales team's emails or their outreach to prospects. So, I love that kind of content where we can really break it down and use it in a ton of different ways because we just get so much value out of it. But I think, certainly in the B2B space, finding really great ways of telling the customer story that's still the bit that gets me really excited. Many years ago, I had a piece of advice from someone which has stuck with me, which was technology is simply the enabler for change. And that really stuck with me because you can have the most powerful piece of software in the world, but if you don't have a customer who has a vision for what they want to achieve or a strategy that they want to drive, that software is probably going to fail because they're not going to have a really robust way of using it. So for us, when we can tell those customer stories, it isn't necessarily about the Khoros platform or what it does. It's actually about what was the vision of that customer? What were they trying to do? How were they trying to create a greater experience for their audience or their fans or their customers? And knowing that the technology was the enabler for that to happen. I think those customer stories are still really valuable as well.
So do you have an example of like one in particular or something you've done recently?
There's quite a few. I think we have a community platform, which I think is really exciting. We did a webinar actually only a few weeks ago where we had Visma, Spotify, BT all on the call, and they were all talking about how they use their branded communities, and it's all in completely different ways. There's no brands don't typically use communities in the same kind of way. They have different reasons for doing it. I think Spotify is a fantastic example of a branded community because they get so much product insight out of it. What do their audience want? They have their rock stars in there who can really amplify messages. They're able to take that insight and really drive it across the business to make the Spotify platform better. BT is completely different in terms of how they kind of approach community. So I think there's a ton of different stories, and I think the social marketing space as well is really interesting because people really do use that insight to get closer to their audiences. So we are lucky in that we have some fantastic customers, and they're all using the software in different ways to really drive, really innovative kind of strategies and initiatives within their business.
That's really cool that you're able to get customers to like participate in your online events. Do you have any tips for that? How do you convince customers to take part and do these yeah.
It's not always easy. I think this year especially, we've really tried to think differently about how we've approached events. In the past, we've done a lot more kind of face-to-face events, and they work really well because we are lucky in that we have a customer base that actually wants to get together. They want to network, they want to meet each other. We do have some fantastic customers who tell great stories. So, we are kind of blessed in that we normally have enough people, enough customers that will raise their hand and say, yeah, we'd like to do this. This year we had to think differently. And I think the big challenge was that everyone was just so busy. It was difficult to get people's time. So we had to think of ways that the ask was a lot easier on the speaker. So using the recent community webinar, we said no slides, no preparation. Here's the questions. We're going to do it as an interview style. We still did it over Zoom, but it came across almost more like a kind of TV show, if you like, than actually a sort of panel discussion. And that for the ask on the speaker then is just a little bit easier than going away and preparing a 20-slide PowerPoint presentation and working through your speech and stuff. It's really thinking about the sort of key points that you want to get across, and then having a really nice conversation, much like we're doing over these kind of Zoom calls. So I think it's sometimes you just have to put the expectation of the speaker in mind, as opposed to necessarily perhaps what you want out of the event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like you ended up with a dynamic conversation in the end as well. So it's like good for the viewer also.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, I had a question about like how you've adapted to online events this year. And if you wanted to say anything more about that, we kind of talked about it briefly, but you kind of alluded to, I mean, obviously everyone in B2B had to change their event strategy. And did you have any particularly creative ways that you've dealt with that this year?
I mean, I think it was definitely a challenge for us. Like I said, in the past, we've had a lot of success with our face-to-face events across Europe and in other regions in North America and into Asia Pac as well. So it was a difficult time to kind of look at the plan and go, well, how do we change and adapt all of this to meet what the market can realistically join? But actually, once we kind of got over the initial shock, what it boils down to is the fact that, is the content strong enough? If we have a really great piece of content, people will still join. I genuinely think Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I think people are genuinely quite tired of sitting on their laptop 24/7. And do you really want to join another session? Probably not. But actually, if the content's still really valuable, then people will. And we saw, a lot of success running more what I would class as more traditional kind of webinars. They still worked. But actually, what we did was we looked at the plan and went, which are the ones which we really want to do? How can we make them better? And which are the ones which we just don't think are perhaps strong enough for this year, or perhaps we shouldn't, we need to rethink and just perhaps sort of invigorate how that message might work. And then it was really a case of how can we make this as interesting as possible for the people who are going to be on that session. So like I said, we did a lot more where it's like no slides, just forget the slides. No one wants to see PowerPoint slides at the moment. And it was more discussion based. We did shorter sessions, which were in the morning, and more kind of round table stuff where we kind of made it a little bit more closed door, where people felt like they could contribute and have conversations. So it's just a case of experimenting a little bit. Not everything worked. Some things weren't as successful as we hoped. Other things kind of surprised us. But I think that was kind of, like I said, once we got over the initial shock, that was kind of the fun thing of this year, that you can try stuff, and if it doesn't work, perhaps that's okay, because it's a kind of a crazy year. But it was fun to experiment a bit.
And then I wanted to ask you about tone of voice. How would you describe the tone of voice you use at Khoros?
Yeah, we're very focused on tone of voice, actually. And, I think one of the things I would say is that we, as a business, we do try and be approachable. But that's one of the sort of key words for us in terms of the tone. We strive to be knowledgeable. So like I said, we do have a lot of insight that we're able to share with our audiences, whether that's our customers or our prospects. But I think we're very clear in that we don't want to come across as kind of know-it-alls and to know everything about the market. I think, as I was saying earlier, the market just moves so quickly, technology moves so quickly, that sometimes we have to be honest and say we don't know everything, but we're going to go and find out stuff. So I think it's, like I said, really trying to be approachable, trying to be honest, trying to impart as much information as we can and be knowledgeable, but not pretend to be like the experts in everything.
Mm-hmm. And you're responsible for EMEA and Australia and New Zealand, like we talked about. So that means you're working with a lot of different markets. tell us about like how do you make sure to maintain that tone of voice and or while at the same time like speaking to all those different audiences that are quite diverse?
Yeah, and I mean, for me personally, again, I can't pretend to know it all either. So the first thing is that I'm very heavily reliant on the local teams. So whether we're creating content for France or Germany or into Australia and New Zealand, I will work with the local teams to say, hey, is this interesting? Is this something which at this moment in time is relevant to the audience that we're trying to get this across to? And I think essentially it's a case of just not being lazy and not rushing stuff. I think I know what our key messages are, and I know what I want our content to do, and I know what it should be designed to do. But I've got to work with those local markets just to adapt it and tweak it and make sure it's relevant. I think, if we were marketing to hospitality industries in France, for example, and the only case study we had was Taco Bell or Wendy's, I think we know that it's not going to work. The French market are not going to be receptive to those brands necessarily. But if we can unpick what the strategy was for Taco Bell or Wendy's as an example, and what were they trying to do, what were they trying to achieve, how can we then create that piece of content to tell that story in a different way to that market, which then becomes relevant. So I think it's a case of looking at these individual pieces of content. What is it that you want them to do? What are they trying to achieve for that region? And then making it relevant. And I think the local teams are hugely important then. And like I said, it's a case of just not being lazy and not rushing stuff and making sure it's right.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about some of your advice and recommendations. So first of all, just what skills do you think are most important for marketers today?
I think you still have to be fairly inquisitive in marketing. I think you have to ask a lot of questions. I think curiosity is probably the key word there. I think, as I said, certainly in the technology space, in the B2B space, everything moves so quickly that really understanding the customer as much as possible is absolutely vital. So I think the more curious you can be and the more questions you can ask, I think that's hugely important. I think this year has kind of taught us that it's okay to be brave as well and to try stuff. For example, we recently ran a 4-week yoga program with our customer base. And we so happened to time it when a lot of Europe went back into lockdown and people couldn't get to gyms, they couldn't do their regular stuff. And so we hired a yoga teacher who's based out of London. She did 4 sessions each Friday for a month, and our customers absolutely loved it. And I think if we'd have done that a year ago, it wouldn't have made any sense. So I think sometimes, there's a lot of bravery in marketing, and sometimes just trying stuff. And sometimes it's okay to fail as long as you don't do it too often. But I think you also need to be, that curiosity to understand, what does our customer really want? What are they interested in? What are their goals? What are their challenges? And then, like I said, how does the technology or how does the solution or service that we have as a business underpin that journey that they're trying to go on? I think, the more questions you can ask, the better.
Absolutely. That's great advice. So how do you stay up to date on marketing trends?
I'm probably not as up to date anymore as I used to be. I think podcasts like this are kind of my go-to now. This is a great one. Geek Out by Matt Navarra is another one which I don't think he's doing it at the moment, but that was another one which was great for just hearing about the trends and certain themes. A friend of mine, Tom Ollerton, does another one called Shiny New Object Podcast, which are great. I probably listen to more podcasts than I have time to. I don't read as much as I used to, but I think, we're also hitting that time of year where there's going to be 101 trends reports, and some of those are interesting. I think Ogilvy always do a good trends report at the end of the year and a kind of a look to the future as to what the trends might be. I think We Are Social is another one that I always look at just to see what's happening in that market as well. So perhaps I'm not as up to date as I should be, but I think podcasts would be my go-to.
It sounds like you are. Sounds like you're very up to date. So, well, I mean, on that vein, do you have any of the few books you read? Any favorite marketing or business book?
Yeah, I went through a spell of reading quite a few marketing books and business books, and I think I could count on one hand the amount I actually finished. I think the one I would probably recommend and the one I'd mention the most is a book called Webs of Influence by Natalie Nahai. She's a web psychologist, and the book is really really looks at digital engagement and how consumers interact with websites and social content and digital content. And it's really looking at the psychology behind what triggers them into taking certain actions. And I found that, a really refreshing sort of way to think about the customer a little bit more. I've been lucky to work with Natalie quite a bit over the last few years as well. She's spoken at our events. We've done different bits and pieces with her, and she's a super person to work with. But I think that psychology and understanding that kind of behavior, I think from a marketing point of view, is fascinating. And I think they would be the sort of books I would sort of lean towards more now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes sense also working in the customer experience side of things. Yeah. So what's your favorite software tool or app at the moment?
It's probably not the most interesting, but the one I use every single day on my phone is Todoist. So I've used so many different kind of productivity apps over the last few years. Apps like Evernote are fantastic, but I actually find there's probably too much functionality in them for what I need. I discovered Todoist just over about 2.5 years ago, I think. And I just kind of use it as kind of my to-do list from a personal and professional point of view. I use it every morning to kind of plan my day out. I keep all my notes and stuff in there as well to a point. And it does keep me on track. So not necessarily the most exciting app that's out there at the moment, I'd say. But like I said, I use it every single day. And, I think it's really important when you can find a productivity app that works for you to stick with it. And luckily I did with that one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Todoist too, and it's great how easy it is to add things to the list. That's I think what ease of use is super important now. So, speaking of productivity, do you have any productivity hacks you could share?
It's an old one, but again, I think this year's taught us to perhaps rethink it, and that is the good old calendar. I've gone back to Google Calendar and just begun, certainly in the last 6 months, using it in a very different way than I perhaps did 6 months ago. I block a lot more of my time out, whether that's time where I just don't want people to book meetings, or time where I want to go for a walk and get some fresh air that we've been kind of struggling with during lockdown. I don't have a commute at the moment, so I use that time differently. So I think using that calendar as not just planning for your meetings and your schedule for the day, but really using it as a kind of a lifestyle plan has been kind of a slightly crazy revelation this year, and I think I'm still adapting that as well. So I think that to me is certainly this year has been my productivity hack, because the more I can kind of structure my day a bit better, the more effectively I work. And certainly I found when I didn't have that, I wouldn't be as productive. I would then just get frustrated, and that's obviously not a healthy spiral to be in. So it's an old one, but I think everyone should perhaps rethink how they're using their calendar a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I wanted to ask about any professional role model or source of inspiration you could share with us.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been really lucky in that I've had through the majority of my jobs some fantastic bosses and people that I've reported into. So today, Catherine Calvert, who's our CMO at Khoros, Sarah Moore, who was my boss at Spreadfast, Sarah Lloyd Parry at SAP. Interestingly, all females, but all really led their organizations in actually, from a personality point of view, very different ways, but created a really human teams underneath, and teams that really harnessed a really strong team spirit. Everyone really enjoyed what they were doing, and I think we do spend so many hours working that it's really important to enjoy it. And if we can be led in a way that sort of enables that, I think that's fantastic. So I think, it's difficult to sort of pick one sort of professional role model, but people who have really fostered, vibrant cultures within their teams, they're the people I kind of look up to now. And hopefully I'm doing something similar with the teams around me, although probably still learning.
Very cool. And do you recommend any other resources for marketers, online communities, publications, or any other resources?
There's so many. There's two that immediately spring to mind, and hopefully we'll get back to the more traditional conference season pretty soon. But one question is, without a doubt, the best conference I've been to in the last few years. So I think it's onequestion.live is the website. You can check them out there. They tackle the clues in the title. They tackle one question at this conference, and they're really kind of in-depth questions around the industry or the world at large. And it's a fascinating perspective that you get from different people speaking and answering this one question. I think they're doing a podcast at the moment as well, which could be worth checking out, though I've not listened to it yet. And the other one would be the team at Contagious. So they write some fantastic long form articles, typically looking at different brand campaigns from a B2C perspective and a B2B perspective. Their most contagious event is coming up soon, I think. And again, a fantastic event which really kind of shines a light on the industry and all the great stuff that's happened that year. And they do it with a really good sense of humour. So yeah, One Question and the Contagious team are the two I would recommend going to check out.
Awesome. Definitely going to check those out. So we're reaching the end of the interview. So just wanted to give you a chance to give us any parting advice or final takeaways for other marketers in Europe.
I don't know if it's European specific, but I think, again, kind of going back to this year, I think the key kind of thing I've taken away is to be adaptable, to really, build kind of plans and programs where that you may have to pivot quickly and change and adapt quickly, and to not be scared of that and to kind of embrace it, and to have a bit of fun with it. And I think, as I said, we are lucky to be in an industry which is really creative, and so we can have a lot more fun in terms of the programs and the campaigns that we're running. And I think that's something that, again, B2B brands can really embrace. I think, like I said, I think the B2B and B2C lines blurred a few years ago, and I don't know whether those silos exist quite in the way that they used to. I think B2B is way more kind of innovative in terms of how they approach their marketing, and I think we can do more. And I think, again, this year has really highlighted the fact that B2B should be exciting, it should be vibrant, it should be interesting, it should be entertaining, it can be fun, it can be wacky and a bit different. I think, embrace that, enjoy it. And like I said, marketing has a much bigger impact on businesses than it did when I began. And so I think people are open to ideas and innovation. So yeah, really embrace that.
It's a great note to end on. So thank you so much, Graham, for sharing your insights with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me join you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for listening in. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out veracontent.com/mix and keep tuning into the podcast for interviews with content experts. See you next time. Bye.